The night my mailbox exploded into bricks, I thought maybe I'd lost my mind. I stood there in my slippers holding a coffee I hadn't finished, watching red dust settle on the driveway, and felt the sort of cold that isn't weather. Someone had rammed it hard enough to scatter the mailbox numbers across the lawn, and by morning the neighborhood had a new rumor and the HOA had a new fine with my name on it. That's where the story starts, with a dented pride and an invoice. My name is Tom Adler. I live on Willow Grove Lane, small street, big lawns, people who know your yard better than your in-laws. My wife, Maggie, builds things with her hands and calls herself a weekend carpenter. I tinker with cameras and gizmos and spend way too much time labeling hard drives. We like our quiet. Our mailbox was one of those stupid little things you feel silly defending. Brick, handmade by my grandfather, the kind of thing you inherit and keep because it smells like family. It smelled like family on that morning, but it also smelled like gasoline and trouble. They called themselves the Willow Grove Association, and their president, Evelyn Parks, ran meetings like they were small town council hearings, except she never hesitated to pick a target. Evelyn had that polished look, sharp hair, sharper opinions, a voice that closed conversations. People liked the order she promised, and most of the time, that order meant they left each other alone. Until it didn't. The night of the crash, our Ring camera caught a shadow and a metal glint. The car? A black SUV with tinted windows. The driver? Her son, Connor, 24, reckless, the sort of kid who thinks directions are optional and consequences are for other people. The footage showed him laughing with his phone in one hand like it was a dare, swerving just enough to send bricks flying. The thing is, he didn't deny it to his friends. He posted it, and then he, or someone, deleted it. Evelyn posted a pitying HOA bulletin the next morning about safety concerns and slapped me with a $450 fine for improper mailbox maintenance. You could feel the teeth behind the smile. At first I tried the polite path. I called Evelyn. She answered like she'd been waiting for me to make the first mistake. Tom, you know our rules, she said, syrup thin. Mailboxes have to meet community standards. This is your responsibility. When I told her our camera showed someone else, she sighed, like a parent worn out by an unruly child. We can't base actions on rumor, Tom, she said. If you have evidence, bring it to the board. I brought it to the board. The board scribbled, nodded, then went on to other things. Someone said, procedural. Another said, we'll review it. Translation: nothing would move unless the chair wanted it to. That's when Maggie and I stopped being reasonable and started being methodical. She's calm in a storm, the kind of person who organizes chaos into labeled boxes. I'm the one who enjoys the tech cameras, timestamps, metadata, the bits of truth people forget how to fake. We spent 2 nights compiling the footage we had. The ring on the porch, an old neighbor's dash cam, the wildlife cam we'd put up by mistake to watch our bluebird house. All of them, in one form or another, had the same frame. A dark SUV, a kid daring fate, a shove to the curb that was exactly the shove that destroyed the bricks. But footage alone doesn't change a board's mind if the board is a club and the president is its battery. Evelyn had allies, people who liked corners of the neighborhood one way and weren't about to let a maintenance issue become their problem. Also, Connor had friends who were good at deleting things. When we found his post in a backup cache, the sort of file you only find when you're willing to dig, it was gone from the public feed, but it lived long enough in caches and in a couple of screenshots for us to build a paper trail. We printed everything. We saved everything. We felt, slowly, like we were gathering ammunition we could live with. So we set a trap. It feels dramatic to write that, set a trap, but it was simpler than it sounds. We rebuilt a temporary mailbox, a decoy with a cheap lock and a placard that looked like the original from the road. And we left the garage slightly ajar, knowing teenagers will be teenagers. We added a camera with a wide-angle lens and a backup SSD that recorded to 2 locations, because technology is the only jury you can count on sometimes. Maggie baked an apple pie and left it on the counter because warmth calms nerves even when you're about to cause a commotion. We baited the trap with disdain and patience. The night Connor came back, he was quieter. Maybe the pride of being seen on camera had faded. Maybe he thought he could do it again and get away with it because his mother ran the association. He pried the decoy open, and I watched him in my monitor like a man watching a matchbox burn. He was older than a teen. He said something under his breath about "this'll teach them," and took out his phone, the familiar glow, a grin, and tried the stun again. He slipped. He cursed. He didn't notice me step into the porch light with the camera still rolling. I didn't shout, because in those moments shouting makes you look like an overreacting neighbor. I waited until the SUV left before I called the police. I let the footage be evidence, clean and ugly and undeniable. When the patrol car pulled up, neighbors clustered like moths around a lamp. Evelyn came out in a coat like armor, face the kind of neutral you wear when you think the cameras are for other people. I showed the officer the footage. He watched, then he watched again. He took notes. He asked for the decoy mailbox. The cherry on top and sweet, I'll admit I felt it was when he told me, quietly, that he'd be filing a report for property damage and trespass. I'm not a vindictive man, but watching the script flip was satisfying in the way that justice, when it's slow and earned, can be. The HOA called an emergency meeting the following week, housewives and retirees filing into the community hall like it was a church on Sunday. Evelyn opened with a practiced smile. "We must maintain standards," she said. The audience murmured assent until Maggie stood up and pulled out a printout the screenshots, timestamps, a neat folder of hyperlinks we had prepared. She spoke without heat, but with the steady authority of someone who'd done the work. "We have proof of deliberate damage. We have footage of a resident's son acting irresponsibly and illegally." She didn't mention Evelyn by name. She didn't have to. That's when things got cinematic. Members of the board began to shift like sailors changing tack. People who had been comfortable accepting Evelyn's edicts found themselves uncomfortable with her family's involvement. Voices rose, and Evelyn's face, which had held like a porcelain doll, cracked into something human anger, then panic, then a stiff defense about procedures and negligence. Connor stood there, hunched, the kind of posture that says regret at best, defiance at worst. Someone in the back yelled, "Why did you delete the post?" And that question hung like the smell of burnt toast. The recall movement started that night, not because we wanted it, but because people suddenly understood the cost of unchecked power in small doses. The board voted to rescind the fine against me. The police filed charges against Connor. The neighborhood, which had been simmering under the surface for a long time, had found a reason to talk honestly. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't tidy. But it was honest, and honestly is rare. Connor's consequences were small in the scale of the world: a suspended license, restitution for the bricks, community service, but they were public. He had to stand in a room and say he was sorry, which is a strange and modern kind of punishment for people raised to believe their apologies can be private and purchased. Evelyn lost the presidency later that month as a few well-placed votes changed the balance. People asked if we were glad. I told them the truth. I'm relieved, not vindicated. The point wasn't to destroy a family. It was to restore a little scale of fairness in a place where someone had started to think rules stopped applying to their people. Here's the part that matters if you're sitting in your car thinking whether you'd have done the same. Power in small places matters as much as power in big ones. You need to be loud sometimes, but loud without facts is just noise. So, what do you decide when your neighbor's son flips your mailbox into confetti and the person who runs the neighborhood looks the other way? Share this with someone who lives in a place where rules get confusing. And hey, subscribe for more stories that sound like your neighbors, because, apparently, that's where the real drama lies.